Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to our morning coffee live stream. Today's Tuesday, October the 6th, I believe. The daily morning coffee time is going to need to go away pretty soon. Conditions are such that I think I need to resume our practice of alms round and focus a bit more on getting the many preparations for my sabbatical in order. So sometime this week, I'll probably stop that. And I consider doing something earlier in the morning, 7 a.m. And I'd still be able to go on my alms round, or possibly I could do something on the weekend, one morning on the weekend or two, because I won't be walking alms round on the weekends at this point. So people have thoughts or ideas about that, feel free to send me an email at the Hermitage email account. It's listed on the YouTube page. "7 a.m. is not all that early for us here in the monastery, but it's maybe a bit too early for some people. And we've had a good 6-month run during this pandemic. So, and as those who have been tuning in for a long time know, my intention was to take the extra time I had in the morning to support the local and the regional community that's in regular contact with the Sangha here at the Pacific Hermitage, and to recreate at least some of the friendship and kalyanamitta that we share with each other through the alms rounds, through regular meditation events here in White Salmon, in Portland, and annually up at Birkin Monastery with Ajahn Sona and the Birkin community. And I think it's worked well enough. It's been a good experiment. And I've received a lot of positive feedback from people. So we'll see. We'll see what happens going forward. I've been getting increasing messages, people dreading the end of this, but this too shall end, but new things will begin. And I think it has enough benefit that I'll be looking for other ways in the future to share with people. Not on my sabbatical, though. A big part of my sabbatical is stepping away from certain roles and responsibilities and being a bit more internally focused and solitary as a monk. And giving regular teachings is very meritorious, and it's one of the most important ways that monks can practice dhamma, like sharing their practice. And it's obvious from reading stories from the time of the Buddha that the Buddha expected the monks at the right time and the right place with people who were interested to share their understanding of his teachings and, to a certain extent, their understanding of the path of practice. So we endeavored to do that, and I endeavored to do that, and mostly enjoy the challenge of doing that. But first and foremost is to continue deepening my own understanding and practice, and taking periods of retreat, especially long retreat, where I can return to just being more focused on deepening my own practice as a monk, and set aside some of the roles and responsibilities as important part for balancing balancing out my life as a monk. So, and yesterday I was talking about the value of solitude, in particular bodily solitude and chitta viveka, mental solitude. And through the day, reflecting on it, this is part of the merit of having to give a talk. It kind of pushes you to arouse some sort of theme of dhamma, investigate it, try to articulate how it is that you understand it has value. In some sense, it stimulates a fresh remembering of it. All important function of sati, recollecting skillful dhammas. And thinking about it a bit more yesterday, just thinking how rare it is that we get this kind of profound sense of kaya viveka. And the encouragement isn't that that's where we live all the time. In fact, it seems quite clear that that's not what the Buddha wanted for even the monks and the nuns, let alone lay practitioners. But developing the capacity and the appreciation for the value and making the effort, even though it's difficult, to experience a profound sense of bodily seclusion. To be truly alone with your own thoughts and the experience of reality and nature as it is. It really does give us the opportunity to relax certain ways of thinking and being and emoting, and in particular to sort of step away from the interactions and the reactions and the triggering that goes on as we interact with other beings in the world. And it's interesting even how just the subtle sense of the presence of another and the sense that they see you or they might see you or they're making sounds or doing things, and part of your mind never fully disengages from monitoring that, creating stories around that, having views and opinions about that. And even in kaya viveka, that doesn't necessarily cease. But as we spend time in solitude, much of the input that is stimulating that at least is removed and helps us move to a more profound experience of physical and mental seclusion. And because part of where we get caught up is blaming others in the world for our suffering, one of the one of the more memorable jokes in the monastery that I heard when I was first training was, I forget whose Dhamma talk it came from. So he's talking about how at least half the suffering comes from the monk sitting next to you. Or that's what it feels like sometimes, especially in a training monastery. You don't get to choose the schedule. You don't get to choose where it is you sit, who it is that you ordain with. And oftentimes, people that eat next to each other in lineup become good friends, but it doesn't always work out that way. So, one of the values of kaya viveka, just spending time in profound solitude, is the excuses for our anxiety, our fear, our frustration, our anger start to drop away. And we see that it's not so much about others and the conditions in the world, but our own mental, emotional habits and our own unskillful, still spiritually immature response to what it is that the world presents us. And time in nature and time in the wilderness in particular can be really good for getting some sort of check on those emotional patterns and habits, and that tendency to sort of ascribe suffering to the world and other beings in the world. You still might find yourself waking up in the morning feeling a bit grumpy, or finding yourself going through the day getting easily frustrated, angered, annoyed. And the only person you can pin it on or blame it on, if you're not going to own it, are the trees and the plants and the flowers and the animals of the forest. And you can and will do that. um, Sometimes the insects and the noise of the forest feels like a frustration. But maybe more so than the world of people, it just seems so obvious that it's ridiculous to blame your suffering on other beings. They're just varying according to their nature. And in thinking of other beings, it's important to notice how it is that we really create the world in our mind. It's like we only partially know another, and because of greed, hatred, and delusion, the personalities, the images, the world that we create, the world of sankhara in our mind, is never an all that reliable or faithful representation. And when we're still invested in finding completion and happiness in the world, the biases, the attachment to like and dislike are always distorting and coloring how it is that we image other people and image the world. And it's the work of serenity and insight to start to adjust and correct for that. So the mind of serenity weakens and dissipates the attachment to liking and disliking, weakens and gives us a reprieve from the influence of greed, hatred, and delusion, and how that colors how it is that we image others and see the world. And that's part of what we're talking about when we talk about clarity and insight. And the path of practice is to develop skill in serenity and insight. And there's a close relationship between those. Like the serenity works to kind of loosen the stickiness and the attachment to liking and disliking. And as that loosens, we find ourselves in a space where we can see people as they are, see the world as it presents itself. Without the kind of bias that supports the processes of dukkha and suffering. And it's this, and precisely this, that makes the effort to spend time in seclusion, be it bodily seclusion or mental seclusion, so very important. It's like, remember the prescription of the Buddha is like, we don't see clearly. That's, in some sense, a huge part of what the Buddhist teachings is pointing to when it talks about spiritual delusion. And this whole path practice is to help slowly start to withdraw the conditions and the nutriments and the things that feed that lack of clarity. And spending time in solitude, solitude of the body, solitude of the mind, play an important role in that. So Another reflection on solitude. Somehow I ended back up here today. Spend a few minutes and take a few questions. See what's on everyone's mind. How can we best deal with hatred and doubt in the mind? Well, Sonny, there are many ways to deal with that. Like hatred in particular, I think one has to have a more profound sort of sense of just what a harmful and toxic emotion that can be, and how it leads to one's personal harm as well as the harm of others. To harbor hatred and to be a slave to hatred. We don't really, I think for the most part we don't really will ourselves to hatred. It feels provoked in us, partially because of our spiritual misunderstanding of just how harmful it is and how it is that we could come to a different relationship with ourselves and others in the world, come to a different level of understanding to develop the causes to abandon it. But a big part of that is seeing how harmful it is, seeing it as dukkha. And seeing how it is that we can live without it through cultivating various qualities of mind. I think the key, though, is full cost accounting of the harm of even thoughts of hatred, let alone speech or action based on thoughts of hatred and ill will. Doubt is a little more subtle. Doubt, indecision, vacillation, confusion. The important thing there is to realize that just spinning around in circles doesn't really get us out of doubt. You have to see it as some sort of destructive pattern of consciousness that we need to learn how to sort of stop, resolve, step outside of. And, it may be that we're lacking some sort of information, might come from a good teacher or the word of another. It may be something isn't yet clear or resolved in our mind, like sort of say with the field of meditation, we're not clear about the instruction. We're lacking confidence at our meditation strategy. And, I would say the way out of it again is to see it as a unskillful sort of thought, habit, or pattern, and try to resolve it through just discerning what the next step is in sorting something out or making a commitment to how to move forward. And if it's a lack of information, then it's like making a commitment to seek out new information to help bring clarity. Hello, Ajahn. I've retained coarse items from earlier days, such as CDs, movies, which glorify violence. These cannot be recycled. It seems heedless to throw more junk into Mother Earth and also problematic to donate these, possibly poisoning other minds. Question of responsibility and kamma. What is advisable? Well, Dave, I think if you are afraid that these might poison other minds, then I would throw them into the garbage and not worry about it. They're going to be there in the world, and they're probably going to end up there at some point anyways. So, if you really feel that that's the greatest danger, then I would just toss them out and not worry about it too much. But also, I don't think there's any significant kamma in just moving things on like that. These things exist in the world. You didn't create them. So to give them away or sell them or donate them to Goodwill or some charity or something is fine too. I don't think you're going to make any significant negative kamma. One way or another, they will exist in the world for a period of time, and then they will end up decomposing somewhere. Do you have any other ambitions in your life apart from enlightenment? Is it unskillful to do so? That word ambition is a tricky one for me, because so often the way we think of ambition is bound up with this sense that if I can become this or do that or achieve this, we expect a kind of happiness and completion, which seems illusory to me. But there are things that if the causes and conditions exist to support them, I would like to do and see and develop in my life. Aside from enlightenment, some of them are more personal. They happen fine. If they don't, fine. Some of them are more connected to giving back to the world. There's still very few monastics and monasteries and people practicing dhamma or who understand the dhamma as taught in our tradition. And to be able to share that with people who are interested and find ways to help people connect with that and with good teachers and good sources of teaching and good supports for their own spiritual life and practice, and to help create and support the development of spiritual community. Those are other things I'm quite interested in. And whether those things are unskillful depends on whether or not they're tainted with craving and delusion. So it's possible to have ambitions that are empty of tanha, empty of craving. And if they're skillful and appropriate uh, projects or intentions, then, and they're absent tanha, then they're not unskillful. Do you have any suggestions for maintaining clarity once one comes out of solitude and back into the world? Well, Joanna, that's part of the role of staying mindful and connected to one's experience. View and right view plays a role for sure, but as a practitioner, it's really like the heart of mental cultivation and maintaining this framework of right effort and right mindfulness, as well as continuing to sort of attend to caring for uh, and being on guard for the hindrances and the effects of the hindrances on the mind, as one kind of moves back into relationship and responsibilities and interacting with people. So that's oftentimes what we mean when we talk to about staying mindful. The role of mindfulness is to maintain some skillful frame of mind and posture of remembrance and awareness as we move through the world. For the sake of overcoming covetousness and grief and the effects of the hindrances, but it's difficult. Um, takes a lot of nurturing, a lot of practice, and I think a lot of support to be able to do that um, in a very kind of full way. It's so easy to kind of lose that clarity. When I teach meditation retreats, like day-long retreats or occasionally longer retreats, I often try to give some encouragement for people not to think of the different meditation periods as discrete experiences and to try to remain constant, like practice maintaining a kind of continuity of mindfulness and kind of guarding the skillful qualities that arise in your meditation. So you come and you sit for a period of time, and then there's a break, and maybe you have chores, or there's a break to go do walking meditation. And when you end the meditation, don't think of it as, okay, good, meditation's over. It's like that meditation was just a strategy for putting forth right effort and cultivating and enhancing the sense of mindfulness. And in some sense, don't think of it as ending, like nothing really changes other than what it is that you're engaged in and how it is that you pick up a different strategy to sort of watch over and care for the mind as you move into the next thing. Okay, so we've gone over time today. I saw several questions here about my sabbatical. There'll be more about that in the future, both on our website and I'll talk about it more here as things become clear. So, all right, friends, be well. Have a good day. Carve out a little solitude for yourself. And I'll see you all tomorrow morning. Be well.